In this final video for Module 18, we consider arid landscapes of our own American Southwest. So I had to throw this up, the iconic view of arid landscapes in America, the Grand Canyon. So what better way of representing arid landscapes in our own country? We're actually going to talk about two different types of terrain that we find in the western states, Mesa and Scarp, where the Grand Canyon's found, and also an area called Basin and Range. So we have a desert called Basin and Range. So let's jump in and look at Basin and Range. Basin and Range refers to an area where you'd have mountain ranges that are interspersed with flat basin floors. And the landscape just seems to go on forever. Mountain range, valley floor, mountain range, and so on. There's a transition area between the mountain ranges themselves and the flat basin floor. These areas are called the Piedmont Zone. So the Piedmont Zone, you might find alluvial fans, a depositional landform, also a lot of weathering and a lot of rock talus that might have broken off from the mountain range that forms this sort of a transition area, if you will. We're looking at the Piedmont Zone of an area of Guadalupe Mountains National Park in Texas in this photo. And in terms of geology, so you can get a feel for how these basin areas, these flat basin areas, and the mountain ranges form, they're oftentimes formed through the formation of graben and horst. And that's where you have high areas and low areas that are produced along fault lines. So the fault lines, along these fault lines, you have an up-thrown block, you have a down-thrown block, like we've discussed previously, that produces these mountain ranges. And here they are. Here's a sort of an illustrated view of a graben, that low area that would form the flat valley floor. It's not so flat in this one, and then the higher elevation areas. This is the easternmost region of the Basin and Range topography in the Salt Basin graben of Texas. Another example of a deep graben is Death Valley, California. So that's a particularly deep one that's actually located below sea level, and here we see the mountains in the distance. Characteristic of the basin floor is bad water. One part of Death Valley National Park, the lowest place in North America, 280 feet below sea level. A photo from July in Death Valley. The temperature at the time the photo was taken, about 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, just a view of the flat basin floor, just so you can get sort of a feel for how it looks. Basin and range terrain, as I mentioned, this is a sort of an artist's conception of the way it appeared or what it might look like in a sense, at least in terms of layout, if you were to look at a map or if you were to travel in an aircraft and fly over this area. So again, the mountain ranges and the interspersed flat valley floors. Here's another view. This is a satellite view, and you can actually see Great Salt Lake here in Utah in the upper right-hand corner. And then the state of Nevada here covers most of the center part of this view. So the areas of white, you might assume that those are snow. Those are actually areas where there are concentrations of salt. So in the mountains over here, that's snow, but these other areas in the central part of this photo are actually areas of salt concentration. Well, the other type of landscape that I want to mention, Mesa and Scarp, looks differently. It represents where mostly fluvial erosion has lowered the landscape and left behind these remnant landforms, things like pinnacles and buttes and mesas, and they sort of on the edge of the higher landscape that used to dominate. We would call that the plateau. So the plateau is sort of the edge of a higher landscape. So these areas in between the plateau and the mesa, these are areas that have been affected mostly by fluvial erosion where water has removed materials. And so we have some iconic places like the Mittens located in Monument Valley, and this sits sort of in the southern part of Utah near the Arizona border, an area controlled by the Navajo tribe, and really a beautiful place to go if you get a chance. You need to go to Monument Valley and see it. It's in a lot of car commercials, and this is where Monument Valley is located. Here's the border right here, the yellow line between Arizona and Utah. Right in the center of this image is Monument Valley. And here's sort of what happens with the retreat of these plateaus as fluvial erosion, water erosion is removing material. The side view here is sort of what we're seeing as we're sort of accelerated time, and you see the running water has sort of removed some of these features and left behind a couple of buttes and mesas here in the lower image, and you can sort of see an oblique view of what that might look like, a butte and a mesa here in the upper image. And just so you get an idea of some some characteristic landforms of Mesa and Scarp. By the way, Mesa refers to the mesa. Mesa means table in Spanish, the flat table, and the scarp is the steep side, the sort of the cliff on the side, or also called the escarpment. So the escarpment is that fairly steep area that surrounds the mesa, or plateau, or pinnacle, or butte. So Mesa and Scarp topography. Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah is a spectacular place to see Mesa and Scarp topography, as is this is the Cape Royal overlook at Grand Canyon National Park, another great place to go to see this topography. Some other types of topography associated with Mesa and Scarp: Badlands, where you have deeply eroded land, would be another example. Badlands often not with a lot of vegetation. This is Badlands in Death Valley National Park. There's a Badlands National Park in Arizona that you can visit. That's pretty spectacular. And there's also in elsewhere in the U.S. there are some Badlands areas that you can visit. All right, let's talk about just a few other features. I want to draw a distinction between these two features and just ask the question, what's the difference between a natural bridge and an arch? So do you know the difference? When you look at these two photos, one of these is a natural bridge, the other is an arch, and they look very similar. So I'll give you kind of some clues. A natural bridge is always formed by a fluvial process, by water, whereas an arch is formed by just weathering. So the image at the left is the iconic image of Delicate Arch, one of the most famous arches in Arches National Park in Utah. So this is formed mostly by, or really exclusively by weathering. Whereas this Rainbow Arch here shown in the right image, also a National Park Service site, this one's in Arizona, was formed by water. So here's a natural bridge, Coyote Natural Bridge, Glen Canyon National Recreation Area, and another one. And you can see again, water is responsible. Water removes some of the material. So let's take a look at how water does that. So in this image right here, you see a meandering river sort of making a left-hand turn, and you see it sort of swings around. This is an entrenched meander. Now on the cut bank, where the water is moving more quickly here in the center, you'll see that get pushed back as the water tries to connect, as the river tries to cut this, create a cutoff meander and cut off this former course. And there's what happens. You're left behind with, as materials removed from either side, you're left behind with a pretty spectacular natural bridge. And again, this is Rainbow Natural Bridge. If you want to go and see this, it's quite a hike across Navajo Indian Reservation, where you can take a boat in the summertime. There's a boat that leaves from Page, Arizona, on Lake Powell, that goes out and takes you out to this national monument. Pretty spectacular. And here's that same image we looked at a little bit earlier. This is Delicate Arch, an example of a weathering process rather than water that formed this arch. And here's the process that produces arches. You might have fins that are sort of growing as you have cracks and joints and rock that form these parallel fins, and eventually erosion on either side of the fin will remove material and leave behind something that's high and dry. I mean, that's essentially what an arch is high and dry. So there's the beginning. I'm going to show you a couple of photos of things sort of in different stages. So this might be one of the fins, stage 1, stage 2. You start to see some openings here in one of those fins. These are different places, and then the third stage where the arch forms. So totally dry, not a lot of water, at least running water, involved in this process. A spectacular thing to see in Arches National Park. Double arch. You can see the size of people here, just to give you some scale. And another view of an arch. This one's in Canyonlands National Park, pretty spectacular arch. And pedestals and pinnacles are also in this category of these types of features that we see in Mesa and Scarp. And here we have the cap rock sort of protecting softer rock down below, a pedestal in Canyonlands National Park in Utah. Thor's Hammer in Bryce Canyon National Park, another example of a pinnacle. So we have the tougher cap rock here protecting sandstone down below. And this differential weathering, we looked at differential weathering in an earlier video.